I felt myself really spiraling with thoughts. Like, I would experience, like, in some moments, like, physical symptoms of anxiety, like my heart racing. Like, I would just be, like, in my bed, like, trying to fall asleep, and, like, the thought of having cancer and dying young and, like, all of these really, like, catastrophic and dark thoughts would just pile up in my head, and I wouldn't be able to sleep. And
In the meantime, in live time, do you have cancer?
no.
This is a feature of worry and anxiety, that in live time, we can use our operating system to start anticipating the future about something that may or may not happen. And that's also the power of thought, a power we have inside that we can, in live time, be focused on what's actually happening, being in bed, or while we're in bed, we can actually be using this power to think about the past or to think about the future. And so you're saying before any awareness, you would just be using this power and really creating metaphorically nightmare situations inside your head about this. You didn't even know if you had this gene yet, and you're already imagining having it and what could possibly happen.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Got Your Back, all things mental health grounded in leading edge facts. I'm your host, Faith Escudero, licensed mental health counselor, school psychologist, elementary and special education teacher.
Hi, I'm Ritu. I am a junior host on the podcast Got Your Back. I am an active client of the mental health counseling and 3 principles psychology for the past 2.5 years now. And I am a recent graduate from Northeastern University, and I was part of their 5-year program.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I am the other junior host of Got Your Back. I've been an active client of mental health counseling in the 3 principles psychology for about 2 years now. I'm in my final semester of a 5-year engineering program at Northeastern University, and I started seeking counseling at around my 3rd year of that program.
In today's program, we're going to do a deep dive into anxiety, and what we're going to do is look at what is behind anxiety from leading edge facts uncovered about it. Then we're going to talk about examples of when we felt anxious and how we respond to it now with more mental health inside. And then we're going to get into simple how-to steps so you yourself can start understanding and responding to anxiety from new levels of awareness about it. When we're talking about anxiety, what we're really talking about is being fearful, experiencing fear about whatever is going on. Other versions of that, what we can find ourselves saying or experiencing is worry, being overwhelmed, self-doubt, panic, slightly different versions of experiencing fear about something that is currently happening in our life. Ellie, Ritu, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you've come to understand about anxiety?
For me, when I've experienced anxiety, I think it comes with a lot of physical feelings. So I felt a lot of my heartbeat gets faster and I start shaking, and it's a physical sensation, but it's also kind of an internal sensation too, where my mind goes a million miles a minute, and it's just hard to stop myself from spiraling a lot of the times. But as I've been working through this 3 principles counseling, I think I've started to really see anxiety a lot as just a reaction to the outside, I think, more so than like a thing that's part of me. But yeah, that's definitely part of, or at least like an intro to what I've come to understand about anxiety.
I've also noticed sometimes when you have felt anxious where you'll be a little more scattered with your attention. You'll kind of jump back and forth between things. Like, to me, that's a sign.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I can't really think clearly at all, which is what I've come to learn the first sign that I was not using my mind super consciously. I even have some examples, even like just now actually in the recording studio. I feel like I was starting to experience a little bit of anxiety, and it kind of meant that I was focusing on 15 different things at once in my head and not really focusing on what was really important in the moment. I was just out of fear reacting to the outside and not really reflecting inside and thinking, what is the most important thing to focus on right now? What makes sense to focus on right now? But yeah, I definitely feel like I was seeing those signs. And through this understanding, I feel like I've also kind of been able to be a lot more self-aware for when these things are happening and pick up more on when I'm feeling anxious and what that actually feels like.
Ritu, talk a little bit about anxiety and your understanding of it right now.
I would say that I dealt with anxiety a lot throughout college, even before then, and I think it was just getting worse and worse over time as I wasn't getting help for it. I would wake up super anxious, my stomach would be in knots, my head would be racing, my skin would feel like not that great, and I would just wake up feeling this really, really tense feeling where I'm just thinking about a billion things that I have to do in that day. Even when it came to approaching an assignment, I would be going all over the place. I would start to feel doubt. I would feel like I would be focusing on how I would feel like I can't do this assignment. I feel like I'm not smart enough. I would really focus in on these thoughts that were like really degrading towards myself, and it didn't really help that I was focusing on these thoughts when I wasn't really focusing on the assignment or the thing to do. And I feel like through these principles, I was able to understand that when I'm feeling anxious, the first thing that I should be doing is to just stop what I'm doing, really observe what's going on in my head, really observe like how fast my thoughts are going, but also what types of thoughts I'm having, what are the feelings behind it. And that kind of helped me know that, oh, I'm feeling anxious right now. But I would also listen to my body and see where I'm tensing up. That's the first step that I take whenever I've been feeling anxious. And then I kind of realized like this is something that I'm choosing to do with my mind. I'm magnifying something into magnifying something that's really not that important, or something that I am truly capable of accomplishing then.
So, what you've been learning in mental health counseling at greater levels is that there's an inside and an outside. For example, the outside, in one example you were giving, is taking a test. That is on the outside, it's a physical thing that's happening, but on the inside, it's what is your response you're creating with your mind about the test. And one of the responses that has actually been common with a lower level of mental health or self-awareness has been some form of a fearful response about the outside. In this case, we're talking about taking a test. So we can use our mind to all of a sudden have self-doubt thoughts. We're not going to be able to do a good job on the test, or just being really scared of the test, or going into future thinking that we're going to fail the test, or it's going to be really hard. And so one of the things you were saying that you were learning over time is you would use your mind, you would use thought to magnify the importance of the test, or how you're going to perform on the test, or even if you're not doing well on the test, you're magnifying that as you're anxious. So that's a really important part of becoming more self-aware, is understanding there's the outside, there's the physical, there's the biological, and that is separate than what we're actually doing on the inside, how we're using our mind, how we're using our operating system in response to the outside. And so with this understanding, the three principles psychology, it really focuses on understanding those two things, the outside and the inside, and then going deeper and understanding how do you use the powerful operating system inside more consciously in live time in response to the outside. We can do another simple example that could be common for a lot of people: paying a bill. Right now, there's a lot of talk in the world about paying bills in the economy. In live time, we could receive a bill. That's on the outside, the bill. And then on the inside, it's what is our response? We have a powerful operating system inside. And to understand we're the one in charge of the controls and how we use the operating system, metaphorically. And it's what we do on the inside in live time when we receive that bill. So, for example, we could use the operating system where we have clarity that we can pay the bill and how to pay the bill, regardless what our finances are. It's unlimited the different ways we could use our mind in response to the outside, in this case, the bill. But some other examples are we could go into anxiety. How are we going to pay the bill? Where is the money going to come from? This is another way of using the operating system inside.
In my head, at least, when I was less mentally healthy or just understood less about this understanding, I would have seen stuff on the outside as kind of being inherently stressful or bad. Kind of, I would see something like paying a bill as like a super stressful hurdle that I kind of have to overcome, and just paying a bill would always be stressful unless I won the lottery or something. But you're saying that mindset is a judgment in a way. It's just kind of how you're choosing to view that thing, when in reality, paying a bill or like taking a test is just a thing. It's just like a thing that happens. It's just like a thing that in a lot of cases like makes sense to happen, part of life. But you're saying that the way that we use our mind kind of determines like how we feel and respond to those things.
Spot on, spot on. So one of the things that you're pointing out is that with a lower level of self-awareness, with a lower level of mental health or psychological awareness, we can be under the impression what we're experiencing on the inside, the state of mind, the feeling we're living in is originating directly from the outside, okay? With greater level of awareness about how one works on the inside, it becomes more and more clear that the experience about the outside, in this case, paying the bill, it's coming from the inside. It's coming from the choices being made inside with the operating system in response to the outside. So anyone who is cultivating more mental health intentionally, particularly with this understanding, three principles understanding, they see that at greater and greater levels. That in the past, or in certain moments, one can be lost in their thoughts that they're creating about the outside. The stress they're experiencing is coming from the bill. But over time, with greater and greater awareness, self-awareness about the operating system inside and where the feeling is originating, where the thoughts are originating, it becomes more and more clear, oh, I'm the creator of this response about the bill. This is totally separate. And really that becomes a very empowering thing to understand, oh, it's coming from inside, and I could be looking at this differently. I could be using my operating system much more consciously. The other point that you made was you didn't have any awareness at that time, or a little awareness, that you actually had a mindset about money. Okay. And that's, some people call that an attitude. And really it's just this idea that you've generalized about a particular thing in your life. And in this case, it would be money. And that can be a really common thing, that we develop just this set way of looking at something. And it's like we just go into this go-to attitude or mindset about it. So you were saying you just had a mindset that money is a stressful thing, like you would go into a fearful response about money. And then that really affects you were saying your biological functioning, like your heart would race more, you would feel tension in your body, your breathing would be more shallow. But it also would affect your decisions and actions about that bill, or about how you would utilize money or interface with money. Ritu, you've been understanding this three principles. You've been in mental health counseling for quite some time. Can you talk about an experience now, more recently, you had where in the past you would have looked at it in a more anxious way, and now you're more naturally responding to it in a more healthy way?
Yeah, I would say something that I'm kind of going through right now is transitioning from completing college to trying to figure out what I want to do full time. And I think beforehand, before I started this counseling, I would have viewed this period to be a depressive period or a super anxious period. I would think that I don't know where I'm going with my life. I would go at it through fear and feel like I don't really know what's going to come to me later on. I guess it's like the fear of the unknown. I don't really know. I didn't like the fact that I didn't know what's going to happen next, which I feel is definitely like an anxious response. And so now when I look at this period of having this free time, I can use it more proactively and try to figure out what really resonates with me, what job or like what position really matches with what I'm interested in.
So the outside is completing a part of your life, which for several years you've been focusing on coursework, completing school, and now you're at this period of time where that's done. And now on the outside, it's what job am I going to have, or am I going to go to graduate school? Where's the money going to come from? How am I going to pay the bills? Where am I going to live? That's all on the outside.
Yeah.
But there's multiple parts of your life that are in flux right now on the outside. And then there's what you're doing on the inside. Before, you would have looked at it in a very fearful, anxious way. How's the money going to come in? Where am I going to work? Who's going to offer me a job? What do you find yourself doing now with greater understanding about your operating system inside?
I feel like now with this period, I'm looking at it more from like a mindset of gratefulness, being grateful that I have this time to kind of venture out and see what I'm interested in. I also feel like, especially when it comes to job positions, I think a lot of people, including myself, can feel this job position will determine who I am as a person, like how much money I'm making, what position I'm in, like if it's an entry-level position or if it's higher up.
With mental health counseling and this understanding, you've become more aware about this capability inside called innate wisdom, which we're going to go deeper into. And when we see in present time from innate wisdom, we're more clear from inside the direction for us to head in versus it's all about the outside deciding whether we're good enough or qualified enough, or this thing on the outside is representing who we are as a human being. It's more coming from the inside, from this inner knowing, from this gut instinct that this is the right job for me to take, the best direction for me to head in my life. So understanding more that this capability is inside and listening to it, trusting it, making decisions from it is where the best things happen in our life. Can you speak a little more about that? What it is your understanding innate wisdom is inside, and how understanding at greater levels has changed the way you look at life for yourself?
Well, I would say I think something that I always hear a lot, especially if like dangerous situations happen, is trust your gut, trust your instinct. But why not always apply that with any situation that you're going through? If you're completing an assignment, if you're doing a test, if you're going for an interview, why not just always trust your gut, trust your instinct? It shouldn't just be in a dangerous situation. You can also apply this principle or your innate wisdom to any situation that you're in.
And innate wisdom is the source of when your gut informs you to do something, or you have this inner knowing. It's also the source of realizations, and that's how we experience clarity in lifetime, which is the opposite of listening to fearful thoughts or anxious thoughts or worried thoughts. It's also the source of creativity and healing. So this is one reason to really understand this leading edge science more and the operating system inside, because then there's this more awareness inside of the capabilities that already exist inside and being able to access them more simply, more consistently. And that's what you're pointing to right now when you're talking about trusting your gut when you're in these unsafe situations. This inner guidance system called innate wisdom is informing you how to keep yourself safe or best next steps to resolve the situation. But now you're taking it to another level and saying, why not listen to that inner guidance system, innate wisdom, in this case, your gut, in any situation? and you're starting to talk about how it applies to stepping into the unknown, like a big transition in your life, like going from college to then your professional life.
We have some statistics from the American Psychiatric Association actually about anxiety in adults. And in 2024, from a sample of more than 2,200 adults, about 43% of those adults polled felt more anxious than they did the previous year. This was actually an increase from 37% in 2023, and an increase from that in 2022, where the number was only 32%. So you can see that there's kind of a trend growing of adults feeling more and more anxious. Faith, from your expertise as a licensed mental health counselor, I'm just curious, like what do you think is happening?
So it's interesting because when I work with clients, they actually often need to be educated in when they feel anxious, that they're feeling anxious. My gut is the percentages are actually much higher than this. And that comes from self-awareness. Ritu and Ellie, I'm sure you can give examples of things you're aware about now, feelings, states of mind that you experience that you were much less aware of before going into mental health counseling and learning about three principles psychology.
Yeah, so I kind of have an example in my own life of a medical situation that I was in where I really had to switch from anxiety and fear and, avoiding this scary sounding medical thing. And I had to really consciously switch from that fear to more actionable, facing the issue, making decisions, and being clear about next steps. Because I feel like where I was coming from a place of a lot of medical anxiety, a lot of avoiding and not really having a lot of facts and answers.
Can I ask, Ellie, if it's okay, what is the medical issue?
Yeah, so I was getting a blood test for the BRCA gene, and just to get on the same page if people are or aren't aware of what that is, it's basically just a gene mutation where your body is less prepared to defend against cancer. And so in women, that really means you have a much higher chance of developing breast cancer or ovarian cancer and some other types of cancer. It's something that I know my mother has and her mother. So it's been a thing that I've always been like kind of aware of in my family. A lot of women in my family have had breast cancer, and I think the way that I was reacting to a lot of those things when I was younger and when I was still living at home was with fear, not really knowing what it means to go through that medical experience or like what that gene even is, if that makes sense.
So if we can break this down, okay, there's our biological self. That's all our living matter. That's our body. And when we're talking about our psychological self, that's really the outside, that biological matter, that physical matter, because the inside is what are we doing inside in response to when it communicates to us. For example, we feel tired. Okay, that's our biology communicating. And then what do we do inside with our mind in response to that physical sensation of tiredness? Do we accept it and still go on along with our responsibilities? Or do we sit there and say, I don't want to get out of bed? That's using our mind. That's inside the psychological response. So to clarify, even with our body, the outside, we have choices on the inside psychologically how to respond to what is going on with our body, either in live time or even if you're indicating the possibility of sometime in the future serious illness such as cancer. So before you went into mental health counseling with this understanding, you had some awareness from your mother and your grandmother that there was the possibility you had this same gene. What were you doing inside about your body, the thing you're in all the time, the possibility of having this gene? What were you doing psychologically?
I was definitely in my head a lot. I felt myself really spiraling with thoughts. I would experience in some moments physical symptoms of anxiety, my heart racing. I would just be in my bed trying to fall asleep, and the thought of having cancer and dying young and all of these really catastrophic and dark thoughts would just kind of pile up in my head, and I wouldn't be able to sleep.
In the meantime, in live time, do you have cancer?
No.
So this is a feature of worry and anxiety, that in live time, we can use our operating system to start anticipating the future about something that may or may not happen. And that's also the power of thought, a power we have inside that we can, in live time, be focused on what's actually happening, being in bed, or while we're in bed, we can actually be using this power to think about the past or to think about the future. And so you're saying before any awareness, you would just be using this power and really creating metaphorically nightmare situations inside your head about this. You didn't even know if you had this gene yet, and you're already imagining having it and what could possibly happen.
Yeah, I was really not great at asking questions or being curious about this gene. Like you said, just made up all these mindsets about what could happen or could be. I remember like asking my mom, we were like in like a Chipotle or something, and I was like freaking out about this BRCA thing. I was in my head about it. And I just asked her, like, do I have this gene? Looking back on it, didn't make sense to ask and wasn't also the right time to ask because I was so like cloudy in my head. I couldn't properly ask a question that made sense to ask. I just had no idea what to even do in that situation. And I feel like what that is getting at this whole idea that you were bringing up of approaching these outside things, these like biological things from clarity. Because I feel like that was an example of me not approaching that through clarity. I was fearful, I was anxious, I was asking her a question, but I wanted to hear a specific answer. Asking her a question to try to make myself feel better, if that makes sense, instead of actually being curious about what BRCA is, because I didn't even really know what it was at that time.
So one of the ways you could have been using your mind is just to be more curious about it, to learn more information about it. And you have this awareness now. How did you get this awareness that you could actually be using your mind in a much more productive way that makes sense in response to the situation?
Yeah, a lot of it was just really investing in this understanding. And I think understanding that BRCA and the idea of having this disease, these are all things that exist outside. And also all the fears I was having about getting cancer and dying at a young age was also just entirely me making things up instead of in the moment. I could have been appreciating the health that I had. I could have been appreciating the fact that my mother survived breast cancer, just kind of looking at breast cancer and BRCA from a much more secure place, a much more like curious place. And I do think it's easy for me to say that now, but in the moment when I was having these fearful thoughts and I didn't have the understanding of three principles psychology and mind and thought, I feel like I wouldn't have realized that in that moment.
What are you doing now, or what have you recently done from a healthier, more proactive way of using your mind in response to this gene and potential health crisis?
Yeah, so it kind of, I wasn't really expecting, because I think my mentality about BRCA for most of the time I was in college was just to ignore it. And sometimes I would think about it and get really anxious. But one of the things that I've been learning a lot in therapy has just been addressing and approaching things from clarity with the goal of finding a solution and finding like a way forward. And so the BRCA thing kind of came up a little bit randomly. And that basically, what that kind of led to, like a real life action, was that I actually went in to get a blood test and get tested for BRCA, which before that point, based off of frantic Googling, a lot of websites and people online said that people my age don't really need to get tested for BRCA, don't really need to worry about breast cancer until 25. But as I was kind of working through this understanding and working through this event in my life, it was kind of like an opportunity where I made a decision based off of what I needed instead of kind of trusting what people were saying about BRCA, if that
Or
makes
what
sense.
you researched on Google.
Yeah, which was also coming from frantic and concerned and trying to make me feel better places. But yeah, so I'm definitely curious to hear a bit more about why is it, Faith, from your expertise, why is it so important to have a clear mind and not make decisions just based off of wanting to feel better, be less worried about something? Why is that so important?
It's a built-in capability to clear one's mind, to ground, to, from a resilient state, to be able to look at any situation, whether it's the possibility of a health crisis or, as Ritu was speaking before, a big transition in life where you're stepping into the unknown and you're finding your footing with financially taking care of yourself and finding a full-time job in the profession you spent so much time learning about in college. In live time, there's whatever is going on the outside, and we always have the choice to either the more common way recently, or more than recently, has been to either look at it from an insecure place inside, a place of fear, a place of emotional reaction, or to really choose to be grounded inside from a resilient state with a really open, clear mind, say, how can I experience this, or how do I approach this? So there's several reasons why this is really important. Number one, living in an anxious state, it doesn't feel good, number one. Number two, our body is like a best friend to our psychological self. And so our body starts responding in kind. And as you had pointed out earlier, Ellie, that the heart starts racing, the breathing becomes more shallow, there's tension in areas of the body, the stomach's starting to do somersaults. So when we're choosing to be in a fearful state, our biology immediately responds in kind. And that's where we're starting to create innocently unhealthier biological states. The other thing is that level of understanding, that perspective we have inside. You gave a very graphic example when you would start going into that very fearful thinking where you have your mind's going a million miles an hour and you're creating this possible nightmare in your head, which hasn't happened. Is your case, what your decision was to totally avoid dealing with it, learning about it, getting the information you needed that was so important for you to actually take care of your biology in a way that you could have greater biological health in the process. So it really also affects the decisions we make and how we handle the situation. And for you not to have that information, do you have the BRCA gene? What is your level of health inside? How are you going to be able to actually resolve it and take care of your body in the way that it needs? So when we come from a more resilient state, as you are now talking about that you did, you had an inner knowing the right thing for you to do, despite what it said on Google or the advice you'd been getting was, I need to go get that testing done now and find out, do I have the BRCA gene? How do I start navigating this? This is coming from common sense. This is coming from what's the right thing to do. And so when we use our mind in live time to actually ground ourselves from a resilient state, we not only feel better inside, our biology is not, it's also in a healthier state. We're actually making decisions to actually address that situation and navigate it in a way that's going to be so much more useful and productive that we're starting to resolve it.
Yeah. And this is for everything, not just biological health crises. This can go for relationships and figuring out a job. Approaching it from more secure states of mind is how you're going to really
A simple example is paying a bill. If you look at the bill from a fearful, anxious, worried state of mind, number one, how are you feeling inside? Awful. Number two, your heart rate is elevating, your stomach's doing somersaults inside, there's tension in your body. And then how accurately are you reading the numbers? Are you even paying the bill? Are you throwing it in a pile somewhere and avoiding it and putting it off? Are you paying even the correct person and on time? Versus if you sit there and you just let your mind clear, you ground, and you come from a resilient state, you're going to feel better inside. You're going to have more clarity in your head. And well, your heart is going to be a normal rate inside. Your stomach is going to be calm. You're not going to have the tension in your body. But also, it's going to be more likely you're going to say, oh, this is how I pay the bill. And you're going to actually take the steps to actually pay the bill, whether it's on time or accurately or with the right person.
Would you mind just talking through, like, maybe an example of what a more resilient state of mind would be about paying a bill? Illustrate, like, what
Or like
that
even
looks
how to
like.
get yourself into that state. Let's say someone's overthinking a lot. How do you let yourself go into that resilient state? Like, what are the steps to be in that state then?
So I think both of your questions are excellent. An overview. One state of mind you can have inside is, I trust I can pay this bill. I have an inner knowing I can pay this bill. I can realize how to pay this bill. That's coming more from the state of mind, faith, or resilient state. Or you can go into a state of curiosity, very sincere, genuine curiosity. What's the best way to pay this bill? What do I need to see or understand at greater levels to actually pay this bill in a way I can with my current income? So there's states of mind that we can actually discuss or go into that you're fully capable of doing with your operating system inside to actually live in a more secure, healthy state and your body be in a healthier state biologically, your heart rate, your breathing. And then there is actually understanding the steps inside at greater levels. How do I do that state, which is what you asked about, Ritu. First step in any situation, stopping and trusting inside there's a better way than the way I'm viewing it and experiencing it right now. It's actually a decision. It's a decision with your free will to actually just stop, put a pause button. The opposite would be a decision of, I just keep thinking the same way I'm thinking about it. It's like you're like on a train and you just stay on the train and you don't get off the train. Only the train is like in your head.
And just to be clear, like, that decision, that comes from being aware that you're experiencing those feelings. How are you like aware in a moment that you're experiencing anxiety or fear?
It's a basic thing for people to be aware when they're feeling bad inside.
Mm-hmm. And that's like the physical symptoms, but also just, I know, like, fear for me, there's like a dread. There's a mental, like, darkness, a cloud in my head, and like that's what you're talking about.
People can tune in different ways when they're feeling bad. So some people I've heard they'll feel their palms are getting sweaty, or they'll feel like they're getting sick in their stomach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So sometimes people pick up on the biological symptoms of feeling bad inside, a racing heart. I've heard some people talk about psychologically, they realize their mind is racing. They have these racing thoughts. Or I hear some people talk about, like you were just talking about, Ellie, the psychological feeling of dread. Mm-hmm. So people can pick up, depending on their level of awareness and what they focus on, they can pick up different ways that they're not right inside. Mm. And so that is actually observing and noticing. It's called psychological listening to what is going on inside. And it's the opposite of thinking. So it's even the briefest of moment to observe, to notice what's going on inside somewhere.
I feel like this is definitely a skill that, like, I've had to practice a lot. One of my conditioned habits was definitely just totally tuning out my body and tuning out and just like not thinking about how I felt. And so I feel like it's also important to point out that this whole psychological listening and learning how to do that, it's definitely a process, a practicing and getting better and better at it.
I would also say it's important to sit with whatever you're feeling, not to go to any temporary solution right away. It's very easy for people, once they feel insecurity, they'll go to like a cigarette to make them feel better, or they'll go to alcohol to make them feel better within an instant. But I would say with this approach, you need to understand how to sit with your feelings, and that it's okay to experience whatever you're feeling in that moment.
So when you're feeling bad inside, that too is a decision to go pick up a cigarette or to call a friend or to go out and socialize. That is using one's free will and one's powerful operating system to make a decision, how I'm going to respond to this bad feeling. And that decision is, again, another reaction to what is going on inside. That's the example of making a decision from a lower level of awareness, from insecurity. And those are called coping mechanisms to actually in the now see. Even that person picking up that cigarette somehow knows they're feeling bad inside, and what they're making a decision to somehow resolve that or to make it go away. But a coping mechanism is a decision coming from insecurity, coming from a lower level of awareness, where you're actually reacting to the bad feeling inside and you're trying to temporarily make it go away. We can psychologically listen with any activity. In this case, the outside, the activity is smoking the cigarette, but I'm still using my mind while I'm doing the activity. It's how am I using my mind? So at least in some moments, it would be just to observe and notice the smoke coming into my lungs and then blowing the smoke out. And it was what I was doing with my mind where my head actually cleared out. Some people, when they go smoke, they move to a different environment. And what happens is they start focusing on what's going on in that environment, and their head is clearing out from the stressful thoughts they were just having. So it's always about like what we do inside, and it's always about what is our level of awareness that we are doing something inside and what we're doing inside. And that is really the point of mental health counseling, particularly mental health counseling in 3 principles psychology, is becoming more and more aware that I'm doing something inside, that it's coming from inside and what I'm doing inside.
We've talked a little bit about anxiety and the steps to take, and we're going to do some more thorough closure in a bit, but I did just want to kind of go back to my BRCA example. I was talking a lot about how in the past, before I started going into mental health counseling and really taking it seriously, I was feeling a lot of fear and anxiety about BRCA. I was feeling a lot of, why does this have to happen to me? Why did my parents even choose to have me? As I was saying before, like a lot of really dark thoughts. And since then, through counseling, I've been encouraged and also just decided for myself from higher mental health to actually begin the process of getting blood tests, talking to doctors and genetic counselors, and actually getting answers about BRCA and if I have it. And since then, I found out that I actually do have BRCA. And from higher mental health, like the thing that really stuck out to me is that when I found out that I had the gene, like I got a call from my genetic counselor, and she was saying, I know this isn't the news that we hoped for, but you tested positive for this gene. And I remember what was really interesting was that, you know, at that point I've been doing a lot of work in mental health counseling, trying to understand what BRCA is, how I could respond to having BRCA. And the thing that really struck me is that, like, when she told me that I tested positive, I didn't really feel anything necessarily. I was neutral or like moot towards it, but I really was just taking in that information, because it was just, as Faith was saying, like, it's just a part of me. It's just like a fact of life that I have and I have to live with. And even after that call, the mindset that I was feeling was more so just like gratitude. I was able to get tested for this gene, that the test results came back clear. Now I know what I need to do to be able to take care of myself properly. And even just being grateful that I even had the opportunity to go through mental health counseling that would enable me to just feel a lot more present in this whole journey of learning about myself and my body.
So, if I could elaborate a little bit. So, technically, you have biology. Every human being has biology, and that's the living matter that allows us to interact in this physical world. But we're still using our psychology, our invisible part of ourself, our operating system in every moment to understand that biology, to understand what it's communicating or how to experience that biology or even how to take care of that biology. So you're hearing from the genetic counselor that you actually have this gene. And you said you didn't really feel anything. You said you were just like listening and receiving the information.
Yeah.
My understanding in that moment is the way you were using your mind, you were psychologically listening. You were allowing an open mind and just observing and noticing what the genetic counselor was saying to you. And that's why you lived in this calmer, more resilient state.
Yeah.
And you were able to do that with your operating system inside because of what you learned over the year and a half prior to that in mental health counseling, grounded in 3 principles psychology.
And I definitely do want to just emphasize that. I feel like at this point, I've lived through this. I've learned a lot about it. It can sound this all happened overnight, but I do want to emphasize that I'm 22 right now. I've been in counseling for around 2 years at this point. I think I just hit the 2-year mark exactly. And it's been a very up and down process for me, I think. For me at least, there was definitely a lot of pushback just from like where I was coming from. I was very mentally ill, and like when I started therapy, like I didn't even know BRCA and this whole conversation would have even happened in therapy because I was just really at a lower level of mental health. But I do think that through it all, like I managed to make a lot of decisions that were more conscious and led me to more mental health over the course of years and days and months, and some days not making the most conscious decisions, some days kind of not being super open to hearing what my therapist was saying, but above it all, like I still was making the decision to continue going to sessions and to continue investing in it. I feel like at certain points it was just kind of about me learning to enjoy the process, learning to appreciate more of what therapy was or is for me. Just kind of like always being appreciative like when I do make strides and when I can feel improvements happening, even if they are relatively low-key improvements, I feel.
So it's not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily enjoyable. Like anything, there's days maybe you're not really up for it, but it is about each time how much you're willing to invest in becoming more mentally healthy. It's about the work you decide to do, whether mental health counseling is really useful or not, and you become more mentally healthy. So it was a series of a lot of little decisions you made over time, Ellie, whether it was to continue therapy or how much work you were going to put into therapy or whether you were going to even apply in your ordinary life outside of therapy the things you were learning in therapy. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Also, something
Ritu?
to point out about being resilient is that it's about doing the right thing. It's not about being comfortable. Like in Ellie's situation, she could have easily just avoided getting treatment for it or just keep Google searching, like she was saying, to make herself feel better, but that's in a way to make herself feel comfortable, which isn't necessarily going to help with the problem. With her being proactive and getting help and being curious, that's how she was able to avoid being comfortable and get the help that she really needed and become more proactive. And in a way that this really helped her, from my perspective, really helped her to be more resilient inside and deal and understand this health issue with herself.
I think you're saying something really important, and if we can just take a moment and kind of breathe it in and repeat it, it's about doing the right thing. It's not about being comfortable. Okay. And doing the right thing, just that phrase alone, saying that to yourself sometimes That's choosing to listen more to innate wisdom, making more conscious choices. Being comfortable isn't, that could be more of a preference, or such as picking up a cigarette and smoking a cigarette. I look forward to in our next podcast looking at that more, when you chose to listen to that and actually do it inside for yourself, where that took you.
Yeah.
In smaller moments and in bigger moments. But I'm really glad you brought that up, Ritu.
Yeah.
Today we took our first steps in understanding anxiety, responding from worry to whatever's going on the outside. And there's been a lot of talk about that recently because, well, at least in the United States of America, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, there's been things that have been going on a much broader level politically and with the government, where a lot of responses have been fear or worry or anxiety or panic. And so we started breaking down the outside versus the inside, such as taking a test or paying a bill or having a health issue versus the feeling, the state of mind, the decisions are coming from the inside in response to that. We're going to dig deeper into this topic of anxiety, the steps to take to respond in healthier, more conscious ways to actually resolve these situations, live in a better feeling, live in a better state with our biology. So please come back and join us for the next session. It is worth your while for you to understand how you are capable of more than you think and to actually learn more what you are capable of doing. I'm your host, Faith Escudero with Got Your Back podcast.
I'm your junior co-host, Ellie.
I'm your junior co-host, Ritu.
And I'm grateful that you joined us today, and we look forward to continue this conversation.